Hello, solar industry legends. Lliam Ricketts here from Supply Partners, and today we have a really special feature on training. So on the 21st of December 2022, the Australian Industry Skills Commission, the AISC, released details of an updated training units in the small-scale renewables. Now, this is the first major upgrade of training in over 10 years, and it aims to raise standards, address job shortages and better equipment for the industry for modern energy requirements. Now, huge changes that have happened. We've got some people here on our panel today, and it's going to be a very exciting interview. But one thing I wanted to break into first is a lot of people have been talking about the New Energy Tech Consumer Code. And this is a new thing that's come out, which is administered by the Clean Energy Council. Some of you may have seen this document. If you haven't, have a read of it. But that is replaced the approved solar retailer program. So from the 1st of February this year, companies that were approved solar retailers now become New Energy Tech approved sellers. Now that's a completely separate discussion to what we're going to talk about today. So we will do a separate deep dive and interview on the New Energy Tech Consumer Code. So today we're looking at the AISC and what they have released with Renewable Energy Training Units. And there's been an industry reference committee that's made up of members such as the Electrical Trades Union and the Clean Energy Council. Now, the Clean Energy Council, they've also got their own industry reference group where one of our guests today is actually part of that committee. But before I jump in and introduce our guests and start getting into the subject matter we're going to talk about today, I wanted to talk a little bit about our history, Supply Partners' history, and how that history ties into training and ties into what we're talking about today. So Supply Partners is incorporated way back in 2009 when I founded the business with a couple of other people. And initially we were a solar retail business. So we were out there selling systems, installing systems. We had electricians on staff. We always tried to follow best practice. We were members of Master Electricians. We were a member of the Clean Energy Council. We had in-house crews. We made sure our sales consultants were out there looking at people's energy needs in their home and trying to size a PV system for them back then. So between 2009 and 2011, we did about 5,000 homes. We sold a lot of systems out there and got a lot of experience as a retail business. And from 2012, we've been a pure play wholesaler. But a lot of people in the industry know us, so we're not just a wholesaler. We have a slogan, we're not just a box mover, technical support. So we really started off providing market-leading technical support to people. Further to that, we've led into sales training. So we have another slogan, not just a box mover, sales training. We started using sales coaches and helping people learn how to sell solar systems, how to sell battery systems, how to sell commercial solar systems, and now we're even helping people learn how to sell commercial batteries, which is a whole new complex area. So from that, last year in mid-2022, we started looking at training and we started going, okay, do we look at offering registered training, becoming an RTO to be able to help what we saw as a big hole in the market with battery accreditation? We are focusing a lot on training people on how to sell batteries, and we're looking at our battery attachment rate from our customers. So from our customer base, we're seeing the amount of batteries attached to every single sale just surging. There's around 7,000 installers in this industry that are accredited to install PV, but not many that are accredited to install batteries. So halfway through 2022, we started creating a business plan for an RTO to help the industry be able to train more people in battery accreditation course. And when it came to 21st of December 2022, when this new training units got released, we had a look at them and saw that there were actually modules getting released for salespeople. And that really excited me because from about 2.5 years ago, we've been whiteboarding an idea in our office, which was certified solar consultant. Like I have a real belief that there's a real problem in our industry that you could be out there selling used cars yesterday, and then the next day you could be working in a business selling a $30,000 solar and hybrid investment to a homeowner. You could be selling a $50,000 off-grid investment. You could be selling $1 million commercial investment, solar and renewable energy investment out there with no actual formal qualifications as a salesperson. So around 2.5 years ago, we were whiteboarding this idea of creating a certified solar consultant program where we were going to have non-nationally accredited training and create a program where people in sales could actually do a training course and learn about best practice and at least have some type of badge to show they've done some professional development. Whiteboard ideas don't always come to fruition. We're very busy running a big business here at Supply Partners, so that idea just sat up on the whiteboard. And when this release of new units came out in late 2022, I was excited. I was sitting there going, great, we're in the process of starting an RTO. Here's these training units meeting that hole in the market that I've been looking at for some time. So we've jumped straight in with our RTO and we're focusing on these new units. So this is really a bit of a first, here at first situation. Like right now, this is the first time we're publicly talking about Supply Partners' new RTO. And our RTO is called New Energy Training. So really excited to be telling the market about New Energy Training, which is going to be delivered through Supply Partners. So what I'm going to do now is introduce some of our guests that are going to be here in this interview today. So first of all, I wanted to introduce Bobbi McKibbin. Now, Bobbi has been working in and around the renewable energy industry since 2006 and has been a business owner since 2009. She has a great understanding of renewable energy industry, the changes and challenges it faces. She's living in Albury-Wodonga in Victoria, and basically that's on the Victoria and New South Wales border. So she has to be across basically 3 different government requirements and incentives in the industry. Challenging? Yes, but Bobbi has seen this as a benefit. So Bobbi is well respected across the solar industry and holds a number of positions in community, state and national level. She's a member of the Clean Energy Council Installer Reference Group since 2019, which is one of the consulting bodies to what we're talking about today. She's been a member of Solar Victoria's Industry and Consumer Reference Group since 2019 and a founding member of AUS, which is the Australian Women in Solar Energy. We've also got Robbie Nichols from the Clean Energy Council on today. He joined the CEC nearly 7 years ago and took on the tech team leader role around 2 years ago before moving to the technical program manager role. Recently, he was given a specific role as a senior technical service and standards advisor and represents the CEC, its members and installers on various committees and working groups. He's a third-generation electrician with over 30 years' experience in the electrical industry and over 10 years' experience in renewable energy. His roles have included electrical contracting, manufacturers, technical support, inspections, audits, and more recently, his role at the CEC has allowed him the opportunity to raise the bar in the industry. And our third guest, which is now part of our team at our business and heading up New Energy Training, which I just mentioned a moment ago, is Vogel. So Israel undertook solar installs and design studies directly after completing his electrical apprenticeship way back in 2009. After working for a couple of solar installation companies, including Solar Shop, which is one of the big guys earlier in the days, through 2010 to 2012, Israel started his own business, Vogel Solar and Electrical, which back then was buying off Supply Partners back in the early days. Looking for a change of pace and to be working closer to home, after starting a family, Israel began teaching with TAFE Queensland Renewable Energy Team in early 2017. Whilst delivering all of the CEC accreditation courses and helping out in Certificate 2 Electro-Technology program at TAFE, Israel has maintained his industry skills by working in his business most weekends. So Israel does continue to install solar systems to this day, which is excellent. So to date, Israel estimates that he's personally led around 3,500 solar-related installs, including both on and off grid. Obviously, he's a bit of a sucker for punishment, but he does love his solar, with his favourite jobs being off-grid power systems. So coming on board with Supply Partners in January 23, Israel is excited to be part of our excellent team who prides themselves on supporting our industry, as well as being a leading new energy training company as per New Energy Training, our new arm to our business. So thank you, everyone, for joining me. Thank you, Robbie, Bobbi, and thank you, Israel.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So look, we're going to get into these new training units. I've got the experts here. I'm just really chairing the table here, so I'm going to throw everyone else straight in there. So let's let's have a look there at the background to renewable energy training. So, Robbie, I'm going to ask you here to talk a little bit about the background of renewable energy training units before 2022, so before these new units got released. How did the old units come about? What is the history there, mate?
So this even predates my time at the CEC as well, and even my time as accredited installer. So I think from the intro just then, we're all about the same vintage into the renewable energy sector. And I still consider myself a bit of a newbie. Like, there's guys and girls that were doing this stuff way longer than I've been in the industry. And they started this industry mainly around off-grid systems. The grid-connected stuff didn't come in until government incentives and, feed-in tariff opportunities sort of saw a bit of a boom in the early 2009, 2010 sort of area. Those first, pioneers, I think is a good term for those people. They recognised that they understood what they'd gained knowledge in, and accreditation came around even before the CEC existed with the BCSC, I think it was, Bobby, is that right? Yeah. And the accreditation body linked to the STC claim, and there was, some checks and balances about who could claim those systems. Back in the day, you didn't need to be an electrician because a lot of the work we did was extra low voltage. It wasn't licensed work. So accreditation categories were made for those people, design and supervise. Still exists, so it's not something we actually allow anymore, but there are, for the better term, a grandfathering sort of process of those, as, they're still holding a lot of knowledge those people have. But to do license work, they just need to work with a licensed electrician. And then, 2011, when the original unit sort of sat, you had to be an A-grade electrician to do a design accreditation or a registered engineer. And even the registered engineers had to go through a process to then apply for an accreditation that had to be checked by somebody else in the field to make sure their knowledge and understanding in the units that those engineers had completed met the similar requirements to the units an electrician did. So it does go back a long way, and it's a credit to the people that started it way back when. Yeah,
definitely, mate. Just to jump in there, we have a staff member that was working with us for many years, who's now working for Fronius, one of the manufacturers we distribute for, and he had a CEC design qualification which was grandfathered through. So he was a CEC accredited designer working for us, but he wasn't an electrician or engineer. So that's an example of somebody that was grandfathered through. But so many people since then have said to me, I'd love to do my design certificate, being just somebody involved in the industry, but they haven't had the ability to. So cool.
Yeah, I like
changes.
your point there, Robbie, as well about feeling young in the industry, even though, similar thing like myself, almost 14 years now, but I was freshly reminded of that going to a SEIA conference recently, the SEIA, Solar Energy Installers Association, and definitely there were some of those pioneers you're talking about there who I think were probably installing solar before I was born even, potentially. So there you go. And, to that point as well as to the background you're talking about and even giving it a bit more of the training flavour, like from my own experience, I was mentioning to you before the recording about how I started my study in the Grid Connect solar install and design under what was the TPN-UER units attached to the existing, TPNU units that were part of the electro technology training package at the time. And then we saw in around about 2011 the update to when we moved on to the UEE training package, and now they were what we know as UEE, NEEK, that trip over those little prefixes sort of thing. But we then had those existence of units all the way through from 2011 until we've seen this latest update in late 2022. So it's very exciting, as Lliam mentioned, that, over 10 years since we've actually had a rewrite of these particular training units for the renewable industry.
And Robbie, who's involved? Like, who creates these changes?
So the recent changes are all being done by Australian industry standards, basically sits over the top, or they did until the end of last year, a whole range of government legislation and ministers and all that sort of stuff. So fundamentally, Bobby and I got the opportunity over 18 months ago to sit in a working group as subject matter experts and industry participants. And the good thing was we got a clean slate. We took on what was existing and we looked at it, and even some of the things that were in those units precluded potential people coming in due to the prerequisites and some of the wording around those units. So the group that formed was a really great group of pioneers that were involved, regulators were involved, RTO training units, teachers, people with boots on the roof, all sort of got involved right back then and had the opportunity through a really good process led by the AIS to redevelop these units and put in more units for allowing other, which we'll touch on a bit later, other people in the industry to grow and learn more.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for explanation, Robbie. Bobby, to throw a question over to you, like what were the challenges or limitations associated with the existing, now superseded renewable training units for businesses and the broader industry?
Yeah, I think, Lliam, when all of this was first designed all those years ago, the industry was, sort of really, as much as solar's been around for however long and all that sort of stuff, the industry was new. So they were starting from nothing, no history. It was emerging into what we know now as Grid Connect and all those sorts of things. So it's starting to become mainstream. But in saying that, we're now 10 years down the track, or over 10 years down the track. So it's outdated, it's restricted, it was all restricted to electricians only. So there was no scope for growth there. The industry has really matured. And over that time, we've been able to see and identify what problems have occurred and are occurring within our industry. And this has given us an opportunity to start addressing those and start designing the training schedules of what we need now, but also into the future. Is stuff going to change in the future? Absolutely, 100%. We are a very fast-moving industry. But because it was so restricted with only allowing electricians to do that training, it then, it excluded salespeople, wholesalers, even key administrative staff or other people who worked in the industry or around the industry that wanted to know more or were really passionate about, giving their customers the best experience or giving the business they worked with the best opportunities. They couldn't. They weren't allowed to. They were absolutely discounted from it. So there's all those sorts of things that have come through. But we also, microgrids didn't exist back then. Whereas now we've got microgrids coming into it, gensets more so in their own little things. Maintenance was never even a discussion. Fault finding was never even a discussion. EVs are only just starting. So EVs are where we were 10 years ago. So there's all this stuff that's happening, and to be able to start identifying that and encompassing that into our training modules and into the industry gives great benefit to everybody. And really, what are we here for? Ultimately, we are here to do better by the environment and also give customers a greater outcome in the end as well. Plus, helping ourselves, because often we can be our own detriment in this industry too.
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting to hear your passion in regards to who can now access training. Like, we definitely identified the salespeople side of things, as I told you with my story earlier. Like, we've been looking at how can we bring something to the market which helps salespeople get some type of proper training. But as you said, now there's actually these modules available and they can be accessed by people through the whole value chain. So whether somebody's working in administration or procurement, or they're a project manager, or they work for a supplier or a wholesaler like Supply Partners, they can now actually get themselves national recognised training so they know what they're talking about and can actually... as the summary was on why this has all come about, it's about job shortages. It's about making sure that more people can help deliver more outcomes to the industry. And it's exciting, and I love your passion for that there, Bobby.
Can I just jump in on that? It's great to hear from both of you, Bobby and Robbie as well, from the perspective of those who have been involved with drafting these training units together. And I know, Bobby, you're a great advocate for encouraging other people to get involved on that process. And it's important for the people in our industry, you know, whether they be sales and support staff, administrative, or installers on roofs and designers, that they understand how this process works. And there's a great graphic that we've got about the training system that we were discussing prior to recording as well, and just with how the federal government and the state and territory governments oversee the whole process, but essentially through bodies like you mentioned earlier there, Robbie, the Australian Industry Standards were involved in this, as well as the Australian Industry and Skills Committee, and they pull together these industry reference committees to get a whole bunch of different bodies that represent the industry to now have their input. And that's where we saw below that next layer, we already had representation from the CEC on one of those industry reference committees. The CEC goes and gets their own industry reference group together, and that's where we see Bobbi's involvement as well. So it's just great to see how many layers and how many different bodies from industry are involved. So you know, I'd love to get that message out there for people who are coming along to training organisations to upskill themselves, to understand that they've actually got passionate people like yourselves involved, wanting to make this the most meaningful training experience for them and for the industry outcomes. And it's so much more than just getting a piece of paper to say that you've done that training.
It's funny, Israel, because I don't come at this from a training background at all. And Robbie and I discussed before we started recording as well, went into those meetings with no background and no understanding, and a lot of it was foreign language. I'm like, what is UEE? What is this acronym? What's that? I just had no idea whatsoever. But I had a couple of really meaningful conversations with some of the pioneers on the side, and that really helped bring me up to speed. And it ended up being an amazing opportunity to see the inner workings of how all of this works. And if we want to affect change, we have to understand the mechanisms in which we're working.
And the thing that the pioneers are the people that you talk to that are still having the passion. Yeah. They want this industry to grow and develop and survive. This is our future. And talk to them. They are brilliant. They will have a chat. Any industry event that you can get hold of a pioneer, even their literature, some of the documents that they produced, I think, some of them might have a 35, 40-year document that, it's available. Grab it, read it, understand how things have sort of started out back in the day to where we are now. It's just incredible.
It's a really exciting time. Robbie, just to throw another question at you, like what has changed with the new training units? I think we've got a document here we're going to share up onto the screen while we talk about this. And Robbie, you shared this across. It's the UEE matrix, I think it's called, but it shows there. We're looking at this document now. That red line shows on the left, this is what people can do that aren't electrical engineers or electricians, and on the right is where you need to have those qualifications. What's changed here, Robbie?
I think I mentioned it before, but we got to start from scratch with these rewrite of all these units. So this matrix probably took a little while to get that right as well. And some of the things we focused on was, what are the current standards and where do they sit? So if you have a look at the red line and everything to the right of it, you can see that there's an alignment to, the UEE install source to PCE is 5033, ASNZ is 5033. The next one is the install PCE to the load. That's ASNZ at 4777.1. So the alignment to Australian standards was a big part. But then we also recognise that there are skill shortages for electricians in the country, for sure. Everyone recognises that. There are electricians that just want to install. At the moment, they're being made to sign off on a design they might not have seen until they've got their boots on the driveway that day of the installation. This takes that out and puts opportunities back to designers. A designer might not be an electrician, but somebody that's gone and done a couple of pre-qualifying units to understand what to look for and to how to, the big one we brought in was how to liaise with a competent or licensed person. So if you're not an electrician and you've got a tricky design that involves voltage rise calculations, voltage drop calculations, cable sizing, switchboard upgrades, all that sort of stuff, you need to be understanding of what an electrician's skills has, and he or she can say to you that this site can have solar, but it also means that the cable's got to be upgraded to the shed, the switchboard doesn't have RCD protection. So on the day of the install, the installer who's going to sign off on this has some confidence around the design without having to change things up and basically put their accreditation on a line at some point in time. So all those units to the right-hand side of that red line bring in the opportunities for people in the industry to come in and do that work.
No, thank you for that breakdown. Israel, do you have any other comments about those?
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely. No, I really love that alignment that Robbie's talking about to come into alignment with Australian standards. It makes a lot of sense. It really helps. We've got an industry that is, I challenge almost any other industry in Australia to be as highly regulated and have as many Australian standards that we have to refer to and be across. So this kind of alignment is really helpful for industry, right? As you say, for all those guys and girls out there who are just busy running their businesses from day to day, the more that we can assist in their understanding of what they need to work with, the rules of play, the better it can be. And, really love looking at this document as well, just the many different applications for both that front end of preparation for site survey right through to the maintenance and servicing. We've got a much more comprehensive approach to how we're really addressing these systems and the works in industry, yeah.
The other thing, just before we go on, what we addressed was people going back to do additional training often had to go back and start again and do stuff they'd already learnt to get the next level of accreditation. So this captures that, once you've done the install source to PCE, you've covered 5033. If you want to go into an off-grid role down the track, installing solar on a grid-connected house is basically the same as installing solar to the PCE on an off-grid situation. It's the understanding around the design criteria of those differences that the expertise comes into it.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie. And like Robbie did touch there on some of the benefits that come out of this by people at the front end of the industry, such as salespeople, being able to do an adequate design, and hopefully the installer doesn't turn up and the whole thing needs to be redesigned and probably drive off site and come back onto site with the right hardware. So there's some of the benefits, but Bobbi, what other benefits do you see from these changes? Like that's one big obvious benefit. Is there other benefits you see from these changes?
Well, now we have context to our industry and context to what the requirements are. So context is everything, detail, all that sort of stuff. So it's much more inclusive. It's much broader with who is able to then participate in that. So it brings, our real history and everything into it. As Robbie said, it connects to standards. That is our Bible. We can't do anything that doesn't meet standards, and people need to remember that they're our minimum requirements. So that is absolutely imperative. The fact that those are linked, you can't have them unlinked because then the chain's broken, isn't it? But really, ultimately, the more people we can bring into these training modules and the pre-electrician qualified modules, the better within our industry, because it's just going to mean there's going to be greater resources out there about knowledge and understanding the whys and the what fors of placement of hardware, for instance, those sorts of things. 200 millimeter exclusion zones, all these different,
Robbie, with batteries coming into the game, it's probably
right.
the hardest
placement.
ever. Like,
Absolutely.
you've got a battery, it needs to go a certain clearance zone from a bedroom window, but down the side of a house, maybe only one location that's suitable for that battery, or maybe no locations, really. So if the site survey is not done properly, some installer might pick up a battery from their supplier and drive 2 hours to site and then go, hold on, there's nowhere appropriate to put this battery. Yeah. And that's just a waste of resources. Ultimately, what this all results in is better outcomes. So it's better outcomes for the installers for the exact reasons you just said, for the subcontractors or the electricians that aren't necessarily selling the gear, but they're the ones at the end of the day who rock up to site to install it and then go, no, can't do that because it doesn't meet this requirement, doesn't meet that requirement. Then they have to walk away. They've lost a day's work or, all those sorts of things. So it works out for a better outcome for our installers. It works out for better outcomes for the retailers, because then it can mean that there's a greater connection and a greater understanding between the salesperson or the retailer and the installer. But then ultimately as well, it should lead to much better outcomes for our customers and much better experiences for our customers, and should also hopefully help lift the level of standards of installs and the standards around
products and all that sort of stuff. So it really should start to play into those byproduct benefits down the end as well. So it's a massive flow-on effect that can only move us forward. It is most certainly not going to send us backwards.
Speaking of battery product placement, I was going to say that just pay no attention to the sales catalogues, of course. The batteries are not going in the lounge room next to the couch.
It's always a photo on a data sheet if it's sitting right in the lounge room next to the TV.
They do look nice. They're very pretty.
Or the kids cuddled up to it.
That's right. Yeah. But I must say, I also on that point of the segmentation, again, just coming back to this matrix here, it's just so valuable for skills shortages like we've touched on, being able to upskill people who are in these businesses, renewable energy businesses. They might not have got themselves an engineering degree or an electrical license, but they're going to be so supportive really to their company and the capability that they can support the rest of the work that's going on there. The other thing too, I know I can speak to all of my fellow off-grid installers and designers by saying I love the segmentation as well that's been provided. For those who need to, can still go on and do the extra studies in things like wind, micro hydro systems and that sort of thing. But for that sort of large volume of the market who are wanting to get their hands grubby, installing and designing the solar panel battery generating set systems, that's been looked after here as well, which I thought was a really great forethought.
Yeah. Something else there as well is just to go back to our maintenance and fault finding. We are a growing industry. We have so many people joining our industry year on year. It's insane. And all those people, they don't necessarily understand the old products or the past technology and all that sort of stuff. So to be able to then encompass maintenance and fault finding, those sorts of things within these modules is really important, because then they can go off and hopefully learn some of that historical stuff that has occurred within the industry in the early days, and how the standards have all changed regularly. So then it then helps them learn more if they're out having to fault find or, repair systems that aren't working, and what all the codes and all that sort of stuff mean as well. So those things are huge benefits to everybody.
There's probably another couple points. If we look at trades assistants that have just been following what they've been told to do on a site without understanding why, or even the risks, and apprentices is another one. Like, people could build these sort of courses into the apprenticeship categories now, so that, we've got apprentices on the roof doing solar work. They don't understand DC voltage and arcs and all the sort of stuff associated with solar. So if you're installing solar when the sun's out, you're high risk electrical work pretty much.
That's a really good point, Robbie, about trade assistants. Like, we have met thousands of install teams at our warehouses over the years, and quite often there'll be a leading hand electrician and either an apprentice or just a trade assistant who's helping do the framing and the panels on the roof. But you're right, they're working in an environment of electrical safety risk, but they don't understand anything about it. So now they're able to get some level of understanding, even though they may not be going through an apprenticeship to become an electrician. They're still on the roof dealing with these panels, dealing with these cable runs and dealing with safety risk. So that's a really good point, Robbie.
There's probably one other one that I'd bring up as well, is at the other end of the scale is the compliance and regulation. Like, if you look at who's going to check these sites, they might not be electricians. They might be, DNSP assigned inspectors, for want of a better word, that understand a little bit, but having the opportunity to go in and do some of this training and get the fundamental principles and the knowledge about, not just looking at a checklist, but understand why a system's been installed the way it's been installed. And, in an ideal world, I'd like to see poor design attract demerit points and not just hold the installer accountable who's never seen the design. This is up to the claiming of STCs as a federal thing that you sign off to the federal government to say that you have climbed design and install principles under their legislation. If we can make the industry a bit scared about what they're doing, or you'll go back and learn what you're doing properly, that you're signing a stat deck with the federal government that could implement, consequences. It protects consumers. And that, my background's 12 years doing, or 10 or 12 years doing CER inspections all over the country. Some of the stories we hear, it shakes my head. It really does. But this should bring some protection to the industry.
Yeah, more of a deterrent. It's definitely something we want to see, and I don't mind those ideas yourself. And heaven forbid, people in the DNSPs actually understanding how our systems are designed to work, opposed to just maybe pushing against us, isn't a bad thing either there, Robbie. Robbie, when do these things come into effect, mate? When is all this in effect?
This was announced at the end of last year, so that they are in effect now. Mm-hmm. There's an implementation period because we did start from scratch. We went through every unit, every line, everything that, there was some historic stuff in there that just didn't make sense with some of the way the units were written. We took it out. We cross-checked that unit with the next unit. So there's a lot of work gone into these. The content has to be built to suit now. So there's some base level stuff that's available, but the RTOs and the training organisations have to develop content. So it's available now. RTOs are rolling this sort of stuff out and working really diligently to try and get content available. The accreditation pathways will remain so that people doing accreditation to some of the old units now can still apply, and there'll be a case by case review as those 12-month implementation period sort of rolls over. But I'd strongly encourage everyone that hasn't started to look into these new units as soon as you can.
Yeah, we've already been working hard in the background. So Israel will dig into that a bit more, but we're heavily involved in writing the course content for these new modules that have come into the market. We've actually been talking to ASQA, the industry body where we upload these training modules on scope, and we have seen not just us but a couple of RTOs are got these on scope and are writing these programs, but from what I've seen so far, they're not actually available at all yet in the market. Israel, what are you seeing there, mate?
Yeah, that's right. So, and I would echo what Robbie says, in people's interest really, and in the industry's interest to look into the availability of the new training. As Robbie said, it's already released and it's basically just going to become, like anything else, a supply and demand issue. So once it's available to be supplied, people should by all means be encouraged to go ahead and find that. And so, yes, exactly as you say, Lliam, we're working on particularly, we've got a bit of a roadmap over time where we're heading for April to be starting our initial training in this space. And that's right, there's not too many organisations who are actually yet ready to release. But there will be, as Robbie alluded to there, a bit of a transition period. Typically there is within training where obviously training organisations can't be expected to start delivering new training on the very day that it's released, federally speaking, but they'll be working in the background to have it ready to train people in over time. It's also helpful here, I think, for clarification to make a bit of a demarcation as well between, because we're talking to people in the renewable industry around Clean Energy Council accreditation, as well as the specific training units themselves. So just for people to be aware of, okay, there might be a typical training industry expectation where there's a 12-month transition or somewhere abouts that, where existing training units, if people have got, gone and done their study for Grid Connect battery storage units, for example, which is UEE RE 4001 as an install unit, 5001 as the design unit, those units there are going to wear out over time, so to speak. So there'll be a transition period within the training industry. I expect it's normally a 12-month period. But it's good also for installers and designers to be aware of that the CEC with their accreditation program will make decisions there as well as to sort of over what period of time they will continue to accept people's existing training qualifications, because they're very reasonable there to understand that, they're not sort of making lots of people having to double up on their training unnecessarily if that's the case. Yeah, thanks, Israel. And you did hear it there first, New Energy Training. Late April, we'll have our first courses up and people able to enrol and do those courses, and that's going to be very focused on these new modules. So site survey for grid connect and battery hybrid systems, site survey for off-grid systems, and then we're going to be continuing to release more units, which are going to give people that exciting new pathway to become a CEC accredited designer. So really exciting new time there. Robbie, another question for you, mate. I'm going to put you on the hot seat a little bit here. So what accredited people need to redo their training or do extra training?
Well, part of accreditation is maintaining 100 CPD points every year. So some of these units might actually be eligible for those things, because if you go back and relearn, I think that's a great way to get some CPD points. So that's up to the RTOs to submit that unit for CPD classification as well. Mm-hmm. if you look at the standards changes, the 5033 was a big one back in 2018. 2014 to 2018 didn't change much. So I think if you've done any training in that period on solar, I'd suggest some sort of refresher. If you're going to batteries, battery technology is changing dramatically. Like the 5139 was never written before, so that was the first iteration of a battery standard in Australia. And you mentioned before, habitable rooms, exclusion zones, cement sheet rule, that sort of stuff. It's a lot to try and catch up with. Having a mentor is one thing, but if the mentor is not quite understanding what the interpretation and the requirements of the standards clause are, he's mentoring you, or he or she's mentoring you potentially the wrong way, or something on one site might not carry over to the next site. So I think having your own understanding can only benefit you. And I think in the start you mentioned I'm a third generation electrician. 11 years ago, when I spoke to Dad about going into the solar industry, he said that's never going to take off. So, it's a pathway to, and I've had massive opportunities in this industry as well, which you think of yourself as an A-grade Sparky doing, commercial, domestic, industrial wiring, where do you go? As I say, I've travelled Australia doing audits and got to see so many things and meet so many different people. This gives an A-grade electrician or even a non-electrician great pathways to advance their careers. And opportunities are endless if you get into this stuff. And never stop learning. Like you can't. In this industry, you cannot stop learning.
That's why it's great to have a mentor in here like Israel who's still doing installs. Like I think we were kind of talking a little bit about that leading into this recording, that some of the people out there doing training may have not actually been out there and done an install apart from in their practical training room for maybe 10 years, where, it's really exciting to have Israel here on the team who's out there installing a battery quite often still at the moment as well. So good mentors, definitely a good piece of advice there.
It's a key point. And in the training industry as well, for those of us who are qualified as vocational education and trainers, we do have a responsibility and an obligation to upkeep our industry currency. And I think I was saying to you, Lliam, just yesterday, actually talking about how when I'm in a classroom with people who are studying for their solar or battery-related accreditation courses, I'm sharing photos and stories and videos and things of a job that I was working on last weekend. And I think there's a lot of value in that for people to be having that touch point with industry ongoing, as opposed to sort of, semi-retirement and putting your feet up and sort of being like, I can tell you about my war stories from 20 years ago. It's certainly not the same when it comes to a currency perspective for people wanting to do up-to-date training.
Yeah, definitely. We want current relevance. Bobbi?
Can I add in there too as well? There's this old saying, you cannot know what you do not know. And if we have people that have come through their apprenticeships and say they've, it hasn't been a quality outfit or a company that focuses on quality outcomes that they've done their apprenticeship through, they then go out as a qualified person practicing the same things that they were taught until they get a red flag or something comes up somewhere to say, hang on a minute, there's better ways to do this and all that sort of stuff. So this gives an opportunity for those people to relearn. And then there's also not necessarily great pathways for electricians to transition, or accredited installers to transition from being on the tools to coming off the tools. So by that stage, as you're doing that, you may go back and revisit this conductor site survey thing. You might revisit different things at various times. So, and the example that I gave of somebody coming through their apprenticeship and not having a quality outfit that they did their apprenticeship for, I know a person who absolutely fitted into that category. He rang me. He was so stressed out because he was about to lose his, accreditation, electrical license, everything. And he said, all of this stuff that they're pinging me for is historical. He said, I have learnt so much since not being with that company anymore. He said, I don't work like that anymore. So we sat down and we talked about the different things, and that person is a completely different installer to what they were. And that's a positive outcome for everybody, particularly him, obviously. But that's only one story. There's thousands of others out there that would be exactly the same, because we've got 7,000, 8,000
Over
accredited.
9,000
Oh, there
accredited.
you go.
9,000.
9,000 accredited installers out there, and we've got more coming through every year. So, and we know that not all of those have come from great experiences. So, to be able to give them pathways and advice on where they can go back, and it might even be something that does crop up in the audits, or people losing points, or whatever. There might be suggestions there from the CEC or whoever's running the accreditation processes in the future. There may be recommendations. Well, perhaps you can go back and visit this module. Those sorts of things. So there's an array of opportunity out there in relation to how we then use this training matrix.
Yeah, it's a great point, Bobbi. I really like what you've mentioned there, because there are so many instances of what you're talking about, and many people, the majority of their training occurs within their own environment, their own company that they work with. Yeah. Sure, they do have obligations in industry to get their qualifications like we've been talking about, but beyond that, if they're being trained up in a relatively closed environment, they don't get that exposure to others. They might think they're doing a good job, but until somebody pings them for something, they find out there's something that's been going wrong for a long time. But I've seen that time and time again with people I've worked with in industry, where they're like, that's awesome. I had the opportunity to work alongside someone else. I never knew you could do it that way. That's so much better. And, I think it's fair to say the vast majority of people are wanting to do a good job and do the right thing by the industry. So by having those opportunities there, and I might say as well, things like CPD programs, I would love to see the industry view those as a real benefit. They're not an onerous thing that have to be done, but rather it's the provision of a benefit to help you to upskill all the time and learn these new ways of doing things from other people, to actually help you avoid being in that situation where you get an audit and it reflects badly on you.
I think with audits, if you do get an audit, take it on board and have a look at what you got audited for. The other thing is, if you think you've done it right, challenge the audit, ask for an interpretational clause about, why are you pinging me on this? My understanding is this. Because the problem with Australian standards is they are open to interpretation. As Bobbi said, they are the minimum requirements we need to meet. So have the confidence that you've done the training, you know what you're doing. If you see something come through that you don't think's right, respectfully challenge it. Say, not sure about this. Can you point out the clause, or what's your interpretation of that clause? Stick up for yourself a little bit, but also learn from those mistakes if you've made them.
We need to encourage that, Robbie, 100%.
Yeah.
Because people will just often take their audits, regardless of whether they're CER, Solvic, whatever, they'll just take them and go, that's a load of crap, or, they'll get on social media and they'll have a big carry on, which is fine, because that's often, Solar Cutters, for argument's sake, has been a fantastic forum for people to learn and share knowledge and make improvements. So by talking with others, that is a great way. But then also going back to the source, going back to the person that has, pointed out wrongdoings or whatever may be, because they're not always 100% right themselves. So if you don't have that conversation, that two-way opportunity is not offered, then nobody benefits out of that. Like if it's an inspector or something, they're just going to keep on going on making the same mistakes if they don't realise that it's a mistake.
It's really interesting. I'm hearing a lot of conversation amongst you three about things being current and people that might have done a course 10 years ago, but now they're installing the newer stuff that's out today. Like there's so many, I go back to halfway through 2022 when we started looking at our RTO business and doing this, embarking on this was purely because batteries were getting attached to so many jobs and so many people didn't have battery tickets. But a lot of these people which had just been doing grid connect PV systems and rinse and repeating them every single day, but now they're getting work orders with a battery attached to it and they're going, geez, half the work orders have got batteries on them. I need to get this course. Yes, they might go, and that's actually my next question for you, Israel, is like, what about people who are already accredited on Grid Connect Solar under the old units and want to get accredited for Grid Connect battery? And before you answer that question, like that's talking about how they get accredited for the battery side of things, but this whole conversation's now gone into, well, all the stuff they are already accredited for, being the Grid Connect stuff, they really need like an update on that as well. So I'm going to kind of expand on the question a bit, I suppose, on the back of this conversation, which is like people that have already got a grid connected ticket, how do they now get their grid connected battery ticket? But what do you think about that existing ticket if they did 10 years ago? Should they be looking at some upgrades there?
Yeah, and this sort of touches on some of what we've discussed here already as well, where it is advisable, to make sure that you are staying current with the training that's available. But at the same time as well, it's good to be reasonable about not being too onerous with the requirements and that sort of thing. And I think the CEC have shown that as well. I know that for myself, the amount of times I would have had to have retrained to maintain my accreditation, it certainly would have been an onerous requirement. But having said that, at the same time, you want to be able to reflect that people have been practicing what their knowledge shows in industry ongoing. So to give it a pragmatic example of what we're talking about, exactly as you've just said, Lliam, we could have people right now who hold their Grid Connect solar accreditation. They've done it under the what are still existing units, UEE, RE, 0011, 0016 and 0022, which is our 3 renewable training units for install and design of Grid Connect solar. And like we've been discussing here, they will continue to be existing probably for around a 12-month period or something like that from the training industry perspective anyway. But then they want to go on and do their battery training. Now, currently right now, if they went to an RTO, they could go and do it under the existing battery units, UEE, RE 4001 and 5001. But we've also now got released, as of 21st of December, as we've been talking about, brand new training units for doing those exact things. So that's why we say it'll be far more advisable for people in industry to seek out those opportunities. Maybe, it's going to be a case-by-case scenario, maybe even hold off until there's an opportunity there for them to train under those brand new units so that they can be as current as possible. Now, if they're coming across from existing Grid Connect solar accreditation and units already, and their knowledge is current, they've been practicing what is current in industry at the moment, there's likely to be, I know that we'll be working on this and no doubt other RTOs will be as well, either an RPL process or a gap training process that enables you to be able to show, hey, even though I've got the previous units or the existing iteration of units that are being transitioned within this 12-month period or so, I still hold current knowledge, which is reflected in the new training units as well. So that'd be something to seek out before going on to then adding on your battery accreditation units.
So you're saying somebody that has done the ticket a long time ago, but they're installing all the current equipment every day, they could come in and say, well, I've got prior learning because I'm on these products every day. Well, is that what you mean? Or?
Well, not even that, but basically they could have actually trained yesterday or today under what are existing units, but because of this transition, we've got an overlap happening. We've got new training units available, which are, far more modernised, as we've been hearing from Robbie and Bobbi. They've been working hard on those being totally rewritten, restructured.
You're getting ready to work hard on those too, mate.
That's exactly right.
Yes, these ones are done, you'd be writing those ones.
But people have got that opportunity right now effectively to train under either or. So I know what my choice would be. Yeah. But that's what can be going on. Yeah.
Sure.
Another thing we discussed when we were doing this was potentially there might be batteries without solar, depending on, the infrastructure, the grid, all that sort of stuff. So this allows somebody to go and train to install a battery, but we also put a prerequisite in to understand how to design a battery system with PV. Because imagine you've got an old 1.5 kilowatt system and you go and throw a 13.5 kilowatt hour battery storage system on that. The customer's not going to be happy. It's not going to work. It's just bad practice. So with the prerequisite is you need to understand you're installing a battery, what solar system exists on that roof if it needs to be joined to that battery system as well. And again, Bobbi touched on EVs, like they're an unknown. So the units are technology agnostic. We tried not to specify, lithium ion batteries or anything like that because the chemistry change, the battery technology changes. It might not be a battery. It might be some other sort of storage device that gets installed.
But the example of a a battery going in at a property where there isn't solar. That is already happening now. But an exciting new space, which I'm really excited about, is vehicle to grid space. We're soon going to have, at some stage in the near future, potentially 100 kilowatt hour batteries on wheels pulling up in people's garages and hooking up to the grid. So basically, the understanding around that is going to need to be there under these changes as well. So Israel. When, I think we might have lightly touched on it before, but when will the new energy training units be available? So through new energy training, when will these courses be available, mate?
Yeah, so our roadmap I touched on there before is we're aiming for late April to be kicking off with these sort of front-end training units that we're so excited about, being able to kind of open up the training side of our industry to many people who have already been providing great support to many of our companies in the renewable energy industry. And now they've got, nationally recognised training qualifications available to them. So we're looking at promoting sustainable energy practices. The unit code for that one's UEE RE 0086. Also our site survey. So for both Grid Connect solar and battery systems, or for off-grid systems, specific site survey units there, depending on which path they want to take, or both if they're greedy guts like me. I love it. Then we're going to have that available as well. That's the beginning of our roadmap right there. And then over time, what we're particularly excited about as well, as Lliam mentioned a bit earlier on, is these people not only stopping there, but being able to move on to become accredited designers as well. So a couple more units that are going to follow up in the pipeline after that, but being able to give these people the electrical principles that underpin renewable energy design. It's a fantastic new unit. Thanks, Robbie and Bobbi and all those others who are involved in UEE RE 0051, applying electrical principles to renewable energy design, which is just an excellent development from many people in the past who have tried to achieve this by meandering their way through about 6 or 7 different hand-picked electrical knowledge units from what is typically an electrical apprenticeship sort of pathway, to be able to get all of that safety and all of the electrical knowledge that's required to finally be able to get into the specific training to then apply for their accreditation, design accreditation training. So it's just fantastic that that's all now been boiled down into one unit effectively as the prerequisite to then move on from there. So that's what we're going to be focusing on specifically ongoing into the rest of the year. And then, of course, beyond that, we'll be looking at as well the install and design units, the typical PV and battery related too.
Yeah, very exciting. So anyone that maybe wants to have a chat to Israel, I know a lot of people in our industry head to the Smart Energy Council Conference and Exhibition in May. At the Supply Partner stand, we'll have a big new energy training display as well, where you can come up and have a chat to Israel and have a look at some of these courses. So, look, the last question I had here was for you, Bobbi, which was, who are these training units for? But I think we've kind of really covered that across a lot of the chats here we've had. We've talked about all the different areas of the industry, from admin and logistics and support and warehousing stuff, all the way through to trade assistance, and obviously the salespeople out there consulting with the homeowners or business owners about these systems, getting this. So I think we've pretty much covered that one. But any other comments you've got there, Bobbi?
There's one I just thought of, actually.
Yep.
So a couple of things. Like, as we know, any small business owner does not wear one hat. They wear multiple hats. But also, we have a really, particularly in my geographical area in this country, in northeast Victoria, we have a really, really strong community energy group. So there are a whole lot of volunteers, of all different backgrounds that are incredibly passionate about transitioning to renewables and transitioning as fast as we can. And then there's other enthusiasts as well. So those people, they might just want to come in and just, whet their appetite a little bit to give themselves a bit more basic understanding to go out into community and impart knowledge or, learn more and stuff like that. So we're going to see all those sorts of things. And we are incredibly skills poor, or people poor, I suppose, as opposed to skills poor in our industry. We need an enormous amount of people to come into our industry to meet our demand, and for the governments to meet their renewable energy targets and transitioning and everything as well. So to be able to offer a wider range to a much wider audience is just phenomenal. So congratulations, supply partners. Congratulations to everybody who was involved in this whole review. It's been an enormous amount of work, but I think it sets us in good stead for now and into the future. But we're going to have to do this. This is a problem. We are in an ever-changing and a very fast-paced industry, so we do need to do this more regularly.
I think you're right. The amount of people that are going to be coming into this industry, like the targets that the government has set for us, is going to have to mean so many more people working in this industry to achieve those. So
there might even be elements of this that can go into schools.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all about education. They're up and coming.
Yeah. I might touch on something that's keep an eye out for the CEC as well. Like previously, the tech team's information was available to accredited people. There's going to be a technical subscription release, so anyone can subscribe and get access to, CPD training courses. They might be a small fee, but the documents we're doing. So
I've seen some of your new videos, Robbie, that have been coming up there as well.
That sort of stuff. So we want to try and get content out based on the calls we get for help, the calls we get for non-compliance. We build our advice documents around that information, and the advice documents come with a feedback form. So if we've missed something, feedback, we've separated away from the guidelines, because the guidelines were always regulation by, conditions, the terms and conditions of accreditation. The advice docs and the stuff we're doing with this tech subscription means that inspectors can get it, trainers can get it, admin staff can get access to this information as well. So
even before that subscription comes out, where can people find those videos? I was having a look at some of the kind of videos you...
Well, that's the issue at the moment. A lot of them are in the accreditation or the members areas.
Okay.
That's what we're trying to get out. I want to get them in front of that login, but it will be a subscription-based service.
Because they were videos that were meaningful to an end user, not just an installer, from some of the ones I had a quick look at. So
the Solar Month one, the one we've done recently, where I've got a sustainability centre down in North Geelong, CEC came down and filmed my ugly mug on some of those. So that's available
looked all right, mate. They're the
publicly.
ones I saw. I thought they were quite good for end users to even watch.
Yeah. But that just brushes the surface. So yeah, that's available publicly through solarmonth.com.au, I think it is. So have a look on the CEC website. But some of the other stuff, the advice docs and all that sort of stuff, keep your eye out in this space, and hopefully we can share that through the industry channels as well.
Yeah, really exciting. Well, thank you everyone for your time today. No doubt there'll be a lot of questions and comments that come through from people watching this interview today. So we'll circulate those to everyone that's on this panel and try to get responses out to the people that engage with this video. As mentioned, we'll be at the Smart Energy Council exhibition with a stand there if you want to come up and talk to us. But thank you again, Robbie and Bobbi, as it rhymes off quite well, and Israel, welcome to the team. New Energy Training, our first exciting announcement of that for supply partners, and a really big year 2023 for our great industry. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.